Well, I'm going to cover some information, just some basic information on staging soybeans. Staging soybeans is a useful tool. I think most everyone who works with producers or who scouts their own fields needs to know how to stage beans. We time insecticides, fungicides, and sometimes herbicides by growth stage of soybeans, and so knowing what stage your field in, is certainly very important. Soybeans grow vegetatively. They also grow reproductively. Vegetative growth basically consists of the production of new leaves out of the growing point, which is the top of the plant. Every 3 to 4 days we get a new trifoliate on that main stem. Eventually the plant will produce branches, and then it will also start flowering, setting pods, and setting seed, and that's reproductive growth. Staging a young soybean plant is pretty easy, and I've got a poster here with a picture of just a kind of a basic young soybean plant. We have what's called a vegetative stage or a V stage, and the V stage or the V number just correlates to the number of trifoliates that you can see on the main stem of that plant. So in this particular picture, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 working on 5 trifoliate leaves, so this would be a V5 plant example. When plants get a little bit older, like this one here, oftentimes the lower leaves have fallen off the plant and you don't necessarily see the unifoliates at the bottom, or even sometimes those first trifoliates have fallen off. So what you'll see are little scars on that stem where those leaves used to be. That's where the unifoliate leaves were at one time. And then this was where our trifoliate was. We have a branch coming out now, but that's where we would start our trifoliate count on an older soybean stem. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the 12th one, this very small leaflet at the top, the leaves are pretty close to being unrolled and not touching, so we could count that one as well. So that would be 13. So that would be a V13 plant. The other thing to keep in mind when you're staging vegetative growth on soybeans is the number of nodes, because we do use node counts to signify how mature a plant is. Basically, a node is where the leaf attaches to the stem, and our first node is actually at the very bottom here where these unifoliate leaves first came out on that soybean plant. That would be your first node, and you would count each area on that stem where the leaves have been attached. So if you've already counted your trifoliates, add 1, and that will be the node count for those plants. And we use nodes, or node number again, to kind of tell us how far along the bean plant is. Soybeans can produce as many as 22 nodes. This one, for example, has about 13 nodes. But in years where we have maybe shorter season beans, because we're planting a little bit later, we don't have as long a window for maturity. We can have probably 15, 16, 17 nodes total. So this one's getting pretty close to being finished as far as the number of nodes that it's going to put on before it stops growing. The next type of growth that a soybean plant will produce is reproductive growth, and that includes the production of flowers, pods, and then eventually the development of seed in those pods. There are specific reproductive stages that are designated by an R and a number, and these are standardized across all soybean varieties and all maturity groups, so that if we use that definition and we know that R1, for example, is the beginning of flowering, where you can walk out into a field and at least 50% of the plants have one flower on the main stem. You can basically take these definitions of the reproductive stages, walk out into any field in the state of Tennessee and stage that field. You don't have to know what variety it is, you don't have to know what maturity group it is, because it's a consistent, defined term for a specific reproductive stage. R1, again, you have one flower on the main stem on at least 50% of the plants. R2 is called full flowering, and that is the production of flowers on the top 2 nodes of the plant. So if you were looking at the top part of that plant, and these are a little bit older, and we can indeed see flowers on both the top 2 nodes, and so this one is at R2. Once a little more time has passed, we're at R3, and for the next 4 stages where we're looking at pod length and seed development, we are looking at specifically the top 4 nodes on the soybean plant. We're sort of almost ignoring everything going on at the bottom. We're just focusing on those top 4 nodes and seeing what's going on there. So R3, we're able to find very small, about 1/4 inch pods on at least one of the top 4 nodes on that plant. This particular bean is a little bit, has not quite there yet, but we will have pods very soon. R4 is pod elongation or full pod, and we're basically, again, looking at those top 4 nodes, and we're able to find a pod that's about a 3/4 inch long size or longer. R5 and R6 have to do with seed development. R5 is, again, looking at those top 4 nodes on the plant. You're finding a pod with small seed shapes. They're visible through that pod wall. And if you can find one on the top 4 nodes, then that's considered R5. R6 is full seed. Those seed have grown. Looking on, again, those top 4 nodes, looking at a pod or more than one pod with seed that are touching inside that pod wall. So that's considered R6. R6 is at kind of the point where we tend to terminate irrigation, because the plant is kind of has done about all it's going to do as far as putting nutrients and things into that seed. So it's time to shut the irrigation off. Then we will go through maturity, where pods will start to change color. R7, then R8, you've got a plant that's primarily brown, with brown pods, almost ready for harvest.